Gentlemen, this is the coin. This side is heads. This side is tails. JB, it's your call. Call it in the air.
I call heads.
Johnny Futures, it's your call. Call it in the air.
Tails never fails. Hey, sports fans. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Heads or Tails. I'm your co-host, Johnny Futures. And this is the tails side of the conversation brought up by JB. And we're going to dive into what my favorite sports record is. Now, before we get into this conversation, obviously there's tons of records out there. Once I heard JB say your favorite sports record, I was kind of relieved. It makes it a little bit easier because you have to choose, what you think is the greatest sports record. It's just way too much to consider. There's so many different sports, obviously, and so many different records, but I'm going to mention a few of what I consider to be some of the greatest records of all time, and then we'll get into the one that I actually choose. The first one that I even considered when I thought this was more about the greatest record of all time, and I actually recorded a segment for it, but didn't like how the recording came out, and I'm kind of glad it worked out that way, because when I thought about it more, the record I will discuss is the only one truly that still makes me feel good and brings a smile to my face when I think about it. But the first one I was thinking about was Rocky Marciano's perfect record, 49-0. And obviously boxing, there's a lot to consider. Different eras, who was around, the type of opponents, and also, longevity. How many boxers had a perfect record and probably fought one or two fights a little too much and wound up losing. But Marciano's 49-0, I always thought was impressive. Only perfect record out there besides Floyd Mayweather. But for a heavyweight, it's really impressive for me. Time and time again, pretty much all time, heavyweights, they just don't last. And they usually take on that extra fight where they get exposed as being too old, just not having the skill set, or the young, hungry heavyweight is coming in. And heavyweight boxing is a different animal from other boxing. Not that it's less skillful, but when you have a fighter towards the end of his career in the heavyweight division fighting a newer fighter, let's say, that newer fighter is going to have a little bit more pop, maybe a little bit more speed. Mike Tyson was a good example of that. He dominated the boxing world for a while there. Everybody knows his story. But Marciano being on the smaller side of heavyweights historically and fighting a lot of opponents that were, if they were considered good opponents, it was before they fought Marciano. So I'm kind of glad we didn't get into that whole topic, although I did have what I thought was a pretty decent argument for it. Sticking with boxing, another record of mine, which is, I kind of consider this one of my favorite records, because I probably bring this up a decent amount of time, but way back in, I believe it was 1893, it was a actual boxing match. It did have rules. Rules were different back then, but the longest fight of all time in boxing history. And if you look it up, it'll be Andy Bowen versus Jack Burke. And before I get into how long the fight was, let's talk about what happened with this. So Burke, when the fight ended, Jack Burke broke bones in both hands from punching. Andy Bowen couldn't continue anymore. He was just exhausted. The stamina alone to box one round in boxing is unbelievable. And these guys boxed for 7 hours and 19 minutes. And that broke down to 110 rounds. Just think about that for a second. 110 rounds. Now, back then, rounds weren't timed. I'm sure some rounds probably went over, the amount of time that we do for boxing now, 3-minute rounds. But back then, rounds would end when an opponent couldn't get up. So basically you got beaten until you couldn't get up, and then you had to go another round, and then go another round, and do that 108 times or so. So I wanted to mention that, and I recommend looking that up too, because there is some there's great write-ups about that fight and everything else, and it's just unbelievable to think that these guys stood in the ring for 7 hours and 19 minutes. I believe the fight started around 9 p.m. and ended in the 4 o'clock era. Some other records we could talk about: the AL home run record for a season. Judge, I'm a Yankee fan, 62 home runs, finally broke 61. We could talk about Bonds' 73 home runs, which is just unbelievable. So many records that Bonds owns. As fun as they were to watch, everybody knows the aftermath of the whole steroids era and everything, and that could be another 20 different episodes on Heads or Tails just discussing that. But then you have the Bonds' all-time home run record, 762 home runs career. Just ridiculous. In hockey, Ovechkin's 911 goals right now. And then we get into football. Eric Dickerson's 2,105 rushing yards in a season. Granted, it came close to getting eclipsed, but just a phenomenal record. Jerry Rice, the king of wide receivers. I had a lot of consideration for him with some of his records, but, his receiving records all time, 22,895 yards. Just unbelievable. And people might say, Rice played forever, this or that. Yeah, he played for about 20 years. So right there, just do the math. That's over 1,000 yards a year, every single year he played. And just to put it into perspective with that record, so he's sitting at 22,895. Larry Fitzgerald. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like Larry Fitzgerald played forever in the NFL. He's at number 2 on this record, and he only has 17,492 yards. It's almost 5,000 yards less than what Jerry Rice had. Just unbelievable. But with all that being said, all these records out there, I had to go and be a homer and pick something from the New York Giants. And I'm not even going to get into, NFC Championship game from 2000, Giants-Vikings. Kerry Collins, 28 of 39, 5 TDs, 120.8 QBR. He did have 2 interceptions. 41-0, Giants win, go on to the Super Bowl. Great postseason record. Phil Simms, sticking on quarterbacks. Phil Simms, 22 of 25 for 268 yards, 3 touchdowns, a 150.9 QBR in Super Bowl 21. Highest completion percentage in Super Bowl history. Great record, but not my favorite. That might be my second favorite, actually. Now, what we're going to discuss today, and this gets into the nitty-gritty of NFL stats as far as I'm concerned, but we are going to talk about postseason passing yards and who holds the record for most postseason passing yards. So that's the playoffs and the Super Bowl all combined. Doesn't have to be the Super Bowl. Anybody's postseason season, most yards all time. And that record doesn't go to Tom Brady. It doesn't go to Peyton Manning. It doesn't go to John Elway. Dan Marino made it to a Super Bowl, so he did a playoff run and made it to the big game. It doesn't even go to Dan Marino. Joe Montana, all the years he was in the postseason, you think he might be up there, but he's not even up there. No, what I'm talking about is Eli Manning and his 1,219 yards in the postseason, 2011, culminated to a Super Bowl 46 victory rematch against the Patriots from 4 years earlier in Super Bowl 42, where the Giants saved the Dolphins' perfect record and beat those perfect Patriots. Nope. 2011 Giants versus the 2011 Patriots. Eli Manning capped off an epic run in the playoffs and succeeded in breaking the record for most passing yards in a postseason. Now, to give you perspective on this, we're going to talk about the other people on this list. I guess we'll give you the top 10 on this list, and we'll go from 10 to 1. So we have Tom Brady in 2020 with Tampa. This is the old school Tom Brady, 43 years old, passed for 1,061 yards. Then at number 9 is Kurt Warner when he was 28 years old with St. Louis, 1,063 yards. Aaron Rodgers, 1,094 back in 2010. Joe Burrow, 1,105 in 2021. Tom Brady, 1,132 in 2017. Tom Brady, 1,137 in 2016. Joe Flacco, 1,140 in 2012. Kurt Warner again with Arizona this time, 1,147 yards. And then Matthew Stafford, the great Matthew Stafford with the Rams in 21 with 1,188. And then, of course, Eli with 1,219 yards. This one, for me in particular, it's one of my favorites, or it is my favorite, I should say, because this was his second Super Bowl. This kind of solidified Eli's status as one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And it's a debate all along. Even in that season when he was competing early on, there was kind of, I don't want to say it was a joke headline, but they asked Eli if he thought he was elite. And he basically said, yeah, I'm there. I'm elite. So they would call him Elite Eli. And if he was losing or not performing well, people would throw that in his face. And then, of course, when he was playing well, they would use that term. So it kind of went back and forth. The other thing, too, is right now Eli is one of the finalists for the Hall of Fame. So this is one of the better arguments for him to get into the Hall of Fame is his 2 postseason runs, which were 2 of some of the most impressive postseason runs in NFL history and definitely in Giants history. Back in 2007, wild card team, every game on the road, just goes and wins every game, and then, of course, beats the undefeated Patriots. 2011, they actually win the division, but they were 9-7 when they won that division. But just to go through those games a little bit, Giants hosted the Falcons that year because they won the division, but they still had to play the wild card round. The first game, 24-2 over the Falcons. Eli's 23 of 32 for 3 touchdowns, a 129.3 QBR, 277 yards passing. And then the next game, the division round, they go to the Green Bay to go play the Packers. Eli, again, just very solid, 21 of 33, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 114.5 QBR, 330 yards passing. And then in the NFC Championship game, Giants vs. Niners is one of my favorite games of all time for the Giants. Eli gutted this one out, just got beat to shreds in that game. One of my favorite moments in Giants history is Eli taking a sack late. He just got pummeled from both sides, and you just see him get up off of the ground. His jersey's hanging off his shoulder pad. His helmet is sideways. The chin strap is like in his mouth. And he just completed a crazy pass, and he has the wherewithal to call a timeout. It's one of my favorite moments ever for the Giants, and one of my favorite video clips too. Just that was Eli in a photograph. If they got the photograph as soon as he called the timeout, just getting pounded, gunning it through, gets the play done when he absolutely has to, and has the wherewithal to call a timeout because he knows the situation. But in that game, 32 of 58. For passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 fumble, but he didn't lose it, only an 82.3 QBR and 316 yards. And then, of course, the Super Bowl 46 stats against the Patriots, 30 of 40 for 1 touchdown, 103.7 QBR and 296 yards. Now, each game individually is not, it's not the craziest game ever, but if you watch the NFL and you see what happens in the postseason, you just see these games. They get so tight. Huge stars during the year. Not that they don't show up, but they're not as great as they are during that regular season. And there's a few reasons for that. Obviously, the defenses are making sure that they don't have those good games. Hey, we need to stop them. One of my favorite quotes in Super Bowl 46 was from Bill Belichick on the sideline late in that game. And if people remember, Eli's basically up against the end zone, airs the ball out, and just throws the most perfect pass you could ever throw to someone who's basically double covered on the sideline. Mario Manningham, only spot he could put it, does it perfectly. It's awesome. And Bill Belichick, right before that play happens, he's on the sideline talking to his DBs. We got to take care of Cruz, and we got to shut down Knicks. They don't have anybody else, blah, blah, blah. And then next play, Mario Manningham. Boom. It was just epitomized the season for the Giants. Just when they needed it most, these people were stepping up and contributing and basically winning that game for them. So That's my favorite stat of all time. When I think about that stat, it brings me a smile. I remember, obviously watching all those games and just thinking about how solid Eli is. And with the sad state of affairs the Giants have been in the last 10 years, I miss Eli. I really do. That solid gameplay, just always there. He basically played every game that he was in the NFL, minus the one benched game by Ben McAdoo, but we won't get into that. Your best availability is your availability, I should say. But, that to me is why Eli should be in the Hall of Fame, and that's why that is my favorite sports statistic of all time. So kudos to JB for picking this topic. This was a great topic. I love talking about it. I don't know if you can hear it through the microphone, but I'm smiling talking about Eli and that run because it was just one of the best of all time for me. Hopefully JB keeps coming with these great topics. Stay tuned for more from the Heads or Tails podcast. Give a like, give a follow, and let us know what your favorite sports record of all time is. I'm Johnny Futures. Take it easy, guys. Stay safe.